My father always told me I was a liability, a line item on a balance sheet he couldn't wait to erase. But standing here today, watching the color drain from his face as he realizes I own the very roof over his head. That's not just business, that's poetic justice. They say the best revenge is living well, but I'd argue the best revenge is outlasting the people who prayed for your downfall. My name is Victoria Hayes, and 14 years ago I was standing on a gravel driveway with nothing but a trash bag full of clothes and a bus ticket. My father, the man who was supposed to be my bedrock, didn't even look me in the eye when he pulled the door shut. He thought he was cutting ties with a burden. He had no idea he was handing me the keys to his eventual destruction. The humidity in Georgia that summer was suffocating, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin and makes everything feel slower, heavier. I remember the sound of the cicadas screaming in the oak trees, almost like they were mocking me. I was 14. I should have been worrying about freshman year or who I was going to sit with at lunch. Instead, I was wondering where I was going to sleep when that bus hit the end of the line. My mother had been gone 6 months. Cancer is a thief, but it's also a revealer. It revealed that without her, I was an outsider in my own home. My father, Mark, didn't mourn her, he replaced her. Within 90 days, a woman named Sheila was moving her floral rugs and overpriced candles into our living room. She didn't want a teenage reminder of Mark's previous life lurking in the hallways. And Mark always chose the path of least resistance. "It's for the best, Vicky," he'd said, staring at his shoes. "Your Aunt Martha in Seattle, she's got more room, more resources. You'll be better off there." Resources? That's how he talked about his daughter, like I was a project that had run out of funding. The bus ride across the country was a blur of neon gas station signs and stale vending machine crackers. I didn't cry. I think I was too numb for tears. I spent those 3 days staring at my reflection in the window, watching the landscape shift from the lush greens of the south to the jagged, gray skylines of the north. I made a silent vow to that reflection I would never be disposable again. Aunt Martha wasn't rich, but she was fierce. She was my mother's older sister, a woman who had spent 30 years teaching high school English and had the backbone of a drill sergeant. When I showed up at her door in Seattle, shivering in a thin hoodie, she didn't pity me. She handed me a cup of tea, pointed to a stack of library books, and told me that the world didn't owe me a thing, so I'd better start earning. And I did. While my father was busy building his new family back in Georgia, buying Sheila a new SUV and putting his new stepson through private school, I was working 3 jobs. I scrubbed floors, I tutored, and I spent every waking hour in the library. I wasn't just studying for grades, I was studying people. I wanted to understand how money moved, how power was held, and how men like my father manipulated the world to keep themselves comfortable. The turning point came during my junior year of college. I was working as a junior clerk for a small estate law firm when a letter arrived for Martha. It wasn't from a friend. It was from a legal team representing my paternal grandfather, a man Mark had been estranged from for decades. My grandfather, Silas Hayes, was a legendary recluse who had built a real estate empire in the Pacific Northwest before retreating into a fortress of silence. Mark had always told me Silas was a monster, a cold, calculating man who had disowned him for no reason. But as I sat in that law office, reading through the private correspondence Silas had kept, I realized the truth was much simpler. Silas hadn't disowned Mark because he was a monster. He disowned him because he saw exactly what Mark was, a weak man who abandoned what he couldn't control. Silas had been watching me. Not in a creepy way, but in the way a predator watches a cub to see if it has the instinct to survive. He had private investigators tracking my progress in Seattle. He saw the 4 GPA, the 3 jobs, the way I took care of Martha when she got sick. He saw the resilience that Mark had tried to crush. When Silas passed away, the bombshell didn't just drop, it leveled the playing field. He didn't leave a dime to Mark, not a cent to the new family. He left the entirety of the Hayes Trust, including the deed to the ancestral estate in Georgia and a controlling interest in the family's holding company, to me. But there was a catch. I couldn't touch the principal until I was 28 or until the primary residence in Georgia faced foreclosure. I spent the next decade becoming the person who could handle that kind of power. I moved to New York, climbed the corporate ladder in commercial real estate, and waited. I kept tabs on Mark from a distance. I watched through social media and public records as his perfect life began to fray at the edges. Sheila's spending habits were legendary, and Mark's ego had led him into a series of bad investments. He was bleeding money, trying to maintain an image he couldn't afford. 6 months ago, the news I'd been waiting for finally hit my desk. The Georgia house, the one I was kicked out of, the one where my mother's roses used to grow, was headed for the auction block. Mark had taken out a second mortgage to fund a failing tech startup, and the bank was calling it in. I didn't hesitate. I used the trust to buy the debt. I didn't just buy the house. I bought the bank's interest in everything Mark owned. Which brings us back to today. I'm standing in that same gravel driveway, but the trash bag is gone. I'm wearing a tailored suit that costs more than Mark's remaining savings. I'm looking at the front door, the same one he slammed 14 years ago. I don't knock, I have the keys. As I push the door open, the smell of Sheila's expensive candles hits me instantly. It's cloying, fake. I hear voices from the kitchen, Mark and Sheila arguing about a bill. They haven't realized yet that the anonymous investor who bought their debt is standing in their foyer. Mark, Sheila's voice is shrill. Who is at the door? If that's the process server again, tell them we're filing for an extension. I walk into the kitchen. Mark is sitting at the table, looking older, tired, and defeated. He looks up, squinting, not recognizing me at first. It's been 14 years after all. I'm not the scrawny girl with the bus ticket anymore. Can I help you? He asks, his voice regaining a bit of that old, arrogant edge. I smile, and for the first time in over a decade, I feel completely at peace. Actually, Mark, I say, leaning against the counter, I'm here to help you pack. You're on my property. The silence that follows is the loudest thing I've ever heard. The silence in the kitchen is heavy, thick enough to choke on. Mark's glass of scotch remains frozen halfway to his lips. He stares at me, his eyes darting across my face, searching for a trace of the child he discarded. Beside him, Sheila looks like she's seen a ghost, her perfectly manicured hand clutching the edge of the marble island. Vicky, Mark finally whispers. The name sounds foreign coming from him. It sounds like a lie. It's Victoria now, I say, my voice steady, devoid of the tremor that used to define my interactions with him. I pull a folder from my leather briefcase and slide it across the table. It's the legal notice of transfer. And as of 9 a.m. this morning, the Hayes Trust has assumed full ownership of this estate and every asset tied to the secondary mortgage you defaulted on. Mark drops the glass. It doesn't shatter on the rug, but the amber liquid seeps into the fibers, a permanent stain, just like the ones he left on my life. You can't be serious, he stammers, finally standing up. He tries to tower over me, using that old intimidation tactic that used to make my knees weak when I was 10. But I've stood in boardrooms with sharks who make him look like a goldfish. I don't flinch. This is my house. I built this life. You were just a kid. How did I get the money? I finished the sentence for him, a cold smile playing on my lips. I didn't get it, Mark. I earned the right to inherit what you were too short-sighted to keep. Grandfather Silas saw what you were long before I did. He knew you'd eventually burn everything down to fuel your ego. He just needed someone to catch the ashes. Sheila finally finds her voice, and it's as shrill as I remembered. This is a mistake. We have lawyers, Mark. We're protected. You can't just walk in here after 14 years and throw us out on the street. Do you have any idea who we are in this town? I turn my gaze toward her. She hasn't aged well. The bitterness of trying to keep up appearances has etched lines around her mouth that no amount of filler can hide. I know exactly who you are, Sheila. You're the woman who told a 14-year-old girl that her mother's jewelry was part of the estate before selling it to buy a designer handbag. And as for your lawyers, they've already been CC'd on the eviction filing. Feel free to call them. I'm sure they'll enjoy telling you that your retainer check just bounced. The color leaves Mark's face entirely. He sinks back into his chair, the bravado evaporating. For a second, I see the man he really is, a hollow shell held together by debt and delusions of grandeur. "Why are you doing this?" he asks, his voice cracking. "I'm your father. A father protects," I say, stepping closer. "A father provides. A father doesn't put his child on a Greyhound bus because his new wife finds her presence inconvenient." "You weren't a father, Mark. You were a landlord who decided the rent was too high, so you evicted me. Well, now the roles are reversed, and guess what? The rent is due." I walk out of the kitchen and toward the hallway. I want to see the house. I want to see the rooms that used to feel like a sanctuary when my mother was alive. I pass the dining room where we used to have Sunday dinners. Now it's filled with gaudy, expensive furniture that looks like it belongs in a hotel lobby. There's no soul here, no history. They've scrubbed away every trace of my mother, replacing her warmth with cold, hard surfaces and status symbols that they don't even own. I reach the stairs and head up to the second floor. My old bedroom is at the end of the hall. I push the door open, expecting to feel a wave of nostalgia or pain. Instead, I feel nothing. The room has been converted into a home gym. There are mirrors where my posters used to be. A treadmill sits where my bed once stood. It's the perfect metaphor for what he did. He turned my life into a workspace, a place to burn off his own guilt and insecurities. I hear heavy footsteps behind me. Mark is standing in the doorway, breathless. He looks desperate now. The anger is gone, replaced by the pathetic whimpering of a man who knows he's lost. "Victoria, listen to me," he says, reaching out as if to touch my shoulder, then thinking better of it. "I know I made mistakes. I was grieving. I wasn't thinking straight. Sheila, she was a distraction. I should have done better by you. But we're family. Blood is thicker than water, right? You have all this wealth now. You could help us. We could be a family again." I turn to face him, and for a split second, I see the little girl who used to wait by the window for him to come home from work. But then, I remember the cold vinyl of that bus seat. I remember the hunger in my stomach during those first months in Seattle when I didn't want to be a burden to Aunt Martha. I remember the nights I spent crying myself to sleep, wondering what I had done wrong to make my own father hate me. "Blood isn't thicker than water, Mark," I say, my voice like ice. "Blood is just what you used to justify your neglect. You didn't care about blood when I was shivering at a bus stop in Omaha during a layover. You didn't care about blood when you stopped answering my letters after the first year. You only care about blood now because yours is running cold." "I can change," he pleads. "We can start over." "We already started over," I reply. 14 years ago, you started your life without me and I started mine without you. The only difference is I built something, you just spent what someone else built. And now the bill has come due." I walk past him, brushing his arm. He feels small, frail. "You have 72 hours, I say over my shoulder as I head back down the stairs. "After that, the locks will be changed and any personal property left inside will be hauled to the dump. I'd start with the floral rugs, they're hideous." I reach the front door and pause. The sun is setting over the Georgia pines, casting long, dramatic shadows across the lawn. It's beautiful. It's exactly how I imagined this moment would feel. But as I step out onto the porch, I hear a car pull into the driveway. It's a bright red sports car, the kind of car a young man drives when he wants everyone to know his father has money. Out steps a boy, maybe 19 or 20, Mark's son, my half-brother, the one who got the private school education and the easy life while I was scrubbing floors. He looks at me with confusion, then at the house, then back at me. "Hey," he says, sounding entitled and bored. "Who are you, and why are you blocking the driveway?" I look at him, this physical manifestation of everything Mark chose over me. He has no idea his world is about to end. "I'm the new owner," I say, tucked into a tone of chilling politeness. "And you're parked in my spot." The boy Hunter, if I remember the social media posts correctly, shuts the car door with a thud that echoes through the quiet neighborhood. He's wearing a designer polo and an expression of pure, unearned arrogance. He looks exactly like Mark did in the old photos, handsome, polished, and completely hollow. The new owner, Hunter laughs, a dry, mocking sound. He walks toward me, jingling his car keys. Nice joke. My dad's lived here for 20 years. You're probably just another one of those debt collectors. You people are getting bolder every day, aren't you? I don't move. I let him get close enough to see the lack of fear in my eyes. Ask your father, Hunter. He's right inside, probably halfway through a bottle of scotch and wondering how he's going to tell you that your tuition check for next semester is going to bounce. The smile slides off Hunter's face. He looks past me toward the front door where Mark is now standing, looking like he's aged a decade in the last 10 minutes. Dad, Hunter's voice loses its edge, replaced by a sudden, sharp anxiety. Who is this woman? What is she talking about? Mark doesn't answer. He just looks at the ground, his shoulders slumped. It's the look of a man who has finally run out of lies. I step off the porch, my heels clicking sharply on the stone path. I'm Victoria, I say, looking directly at Hunter. Your sister, though I use the term loosely, and as for who I am, I'm the person who just foreclosed on your life. I don't wait for a response. I walk to my car, a sleek black SUV that radiates the kind of quiet power Mark always envied, and drive away. I don't look back in the rearview mirror. I don't need to. I know exactly what's happening in that house. The screaming matches, the accusations, the frantic phone calls to lawyers who won't pick up the phone. I spend the night in a high-end hotel in downtown Savannah. For the first time in 14 years, I sleep without the weight of the past pressing down on my chest. The revenge isn't just about the house, it's about the truth. For years, Mark had told everyone, his friends, his new family, even himself, that I was the problem. That I was difficult, ungrateful, a troubled child who ran away. Today, the truth finally caught up to him. The next morning, my legal team sends over the final audit of Mark's finances. It's worse than I thought. He didn't just lose the house. He'd been embezzling from the Hayes family's old dormant accounts he thought no one was monitoring. He was trying to keep the perfect life afloat by stealing from the very legacy he'd been cut out of. He didn't know that Silas had moved those accounts into a blind trust years ago, a trust that I took over the moment I turned 25. By noon, I'm back at the house. This time, I'm not alone. I have 2 moving trucks and a team of professional organizers. According to the law, since the property transfer included all contents tied to the business debt, I technically own most of the furniture too. When I walk in, the house smells like stale cigarettes. Mark is on the sofa, still in the same clothes from yesterday. Sheila is frantically packing suitcases in the hallway, throwing clothes in heaps, her face streaked with mascara. You're early, Mark says, his voice raspy. I'm on time, I counter. The trucks are here for the furniture. I'm clearing the house out. I'm going to restore it to the way it looked when my mother lived here. Everything you bought with stolen money is going to a liquidator. Sheila lunges toward me, her eyes wild. You monster, we have nowhere to go. Hunter is in college. You're destroying a family. I catch her wrist before she can touch me. My grip is firm, unyielding. You didn't care about destroying a family when you pushed a 14-year-old out the door, Sheila. You didn't care about nowhere to go when you watched me pack a trash bag. You wanted the house, the life, and the man. Well, you have the man, the rest belongs to me. I release her and she stumbles back, sobbing. It's a pathetic display. There's no dignity in their defeat because there was no dignity in their lives. Hunter comes down the stairs carrying a gym bag. He looks shaken, the reality finally sinking in. He looks at me and for a second I see a flicker of something in his eyes, not anger but a strange, desperate curiosity. Did he really do it? Hunter asks, gesturing toward Mark. Did he really send you away like that? I look at my half-brother. He's a victim of Mark's lies too, in a way. He was raised to believe he was special, that he was the real son while I was just a ghost. He did, I say softly. He gave me a bus ticket and told me I'd be better off somewhere else. He never called. He never checked if I was alive. He just erased me. Hunter turns to Mark, his face contorting with disgust. You told me she was an addict. You told me she was dangerous and that's why we couldn't talk to her. You lied about everything? Mark tries to speak, to offer some pathetic excuse, but Hunter just shakes his head and walks out the door. That's the real sting. It's not the money or the house. It's the fact that the son Mark worshipped now sees him for exactly what he is, a coward. The movers begin carrying out the gaudy dining table. The mirrors come off the walls. The house starts to feel empty, hollowed out. I walk into Mark's study. Behind his desk is a safe. I know the code. It was my mother's birthday. He was always too lazy to change things that didn't directly affect his comfort. I punch in the numbers and the heavy door clicks open. Inside isn't money, it's a small wooden box. My mother's jewelry, the pieces Sheila claimed were part of the estate and sold. He hadn't sold them. He'd kept them hidden, a trophy of the life he'd traded away. I take the box and tuck it under my arm. The police are going to want to talk to you about those dormant accounts, Mark, I say, standing in the doorway of the study. The embezzlement alone is enough for a 5 to 10 year sentence. But I'm feeling generous today. Mark looks up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. You'll drop the charges? I smile, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. I won't file them on one condition. You sign over the remaining rights to the family name and the small plot of land in the valley, the one where Mom wanted to be buried. You sign it all over to the Hayes Trust, and you leave Georgia tonight. You never contact me, you never contact Hunter, and you never mention the name Hayes again. Mark's hand trembles as he reaches for the pen on the desk. He doesn't even hesitate. He'd trade his own name to stay out of a jumpsuit. Done, he whispers. As he signs the papers, I realize that the revenge is almost complete. I didn't just take his house. I took his legacy. I took his son's respect. And now I'm taking the only thing he had left, his identity. But there's one more piece to this puzzle. A piece that involves a phone call I made 3 weeks ago to a very specific private investigator. As the sun begins to dip lower, casting a bruised purple hue over the estate, I watch Mark finish signing the documents. He looks like a man who has just signed his own death warrant, though in reality, he's only signing away his pride. He pushes the papers toward me with a trembling hand, his eyes pleading for a mercy I don't possess. There, he says, his voice a mere shadow. It's all yours, every bit of it now, just leave us be. I pick up the papers, checking the signatures, clean, legal, final, but I don't leave. Instead, I pull my phone from my pocket. I told you I was feeling generous, Mark, but generosity and honesty are two different things. You see, while I was building a career in New York, I hired someone to look into the new life you were so proud of. I wanted to know exactly what kind of people had replaced my mother and me. Sheila, who had been quietly weeping near the doorway, freezes. Her eyes dart toward Mark, then back to me. What are you talking about? Mark asks, a new layer of dread coating his words. You always were a sucker for a pretty face and a sob story, weren't you? I walk over to the window, looking out at the movers loading the last of the furniture. You thought Sheila was this high society woman who just happened to fall for a grieving widower. You thought her investments were the reason you were staying afloat. I turn back to face them, the blue light from my phone screen illuminating the cold reality. Show him, Sheila, or should I call you by your real name, Brenda Vance from Jacksonville? The silence that follows is different from the others. It's the silence of a trapped animal. Sheila's face turns a ghostly shade of gray. She opens her mouth to speak, but no sound comes out. Mark looks between us, confused. Brenda, what is she talking about, Sheila? Sheila or Brenda didn't just happen to meet you at that charity gala 14 years ago, Mark, I say, stepping closer. She was a professional. She specializes in grieving widowers with inherited land. She's been married 3 times, and every single time the husband ends up in bankruptcy while she disappears with a consulting fee. The tech startup you invested all your money into. The one that failed and cost you this house? It wasn't a bad investment. It was a shell company, and the CEO was her brother. Mark turns to Sheila, his eyes wide with a horrific realization. Is that true? Mark, honey, she's lying. Sheila shrieks, but the conviction is gone. It's the desperate cry of a con artist who's been cornered. She's just trying to tear us apart. She's bitter. I have the bank records, Mark. I say, my voice calm and clinical. I have the transfer trail from your joint account to an offshore holding in the Caymans. She wasn't trying to build a life with you, she was harvesting you. You threw away your daughter for a woman who was literally stealing the food off your plate while you thanked her for it. The look on Mark's face is truly priceless. It's the look of a man who realizes he didn't just lose his money, he lost his soul for a lie. He sacrificed his only child at the altar of a woman who viewed him as nothing more than a bank account with a heartbeat. Mark lunges toward Sheila, but he's too weak, too broken. He collapses against the desk, sobbing. It's not the dignified sob of a man in pain, it's the pathetic wail of someone who realized they are the punchline of a very long, very cruel joke. "Get out," Mark whispers to her. "Mark, please, get out," he screams, his voice cracking. Sheila doesn't wait, she knows when the game is up. She grabs her designer bags, the ones bought with my mother's legacy, and bolts for the door. She doesn't look back. She doesn't care about Hunter, and she certainly doesn't care about the broken man shaking on the floor. She's already looking for her next mark. I stand there watching the woman who replaced my mother vanish into the night. It's a clean break. "You knew," Mark says, looking up at me through bloodshot eyes. "You've known for weeks. Why didn't you tell me you could have saved the house? You could have saved me from her. Why would I save a man who wouldn't even save his own daughter from a bus station?" I ask, my voice devoid of emotion. "You needed to feel the full weight of your choices, Mark. If I had told you sooner, you would have found a way to blame me. You would have made yourself the victim again. Now you know the truth. You aren't a victim of me. You're a victim of your own vanity." I walk toward the door, the wooden box of my mother's jewelry tucked securely under my arm. The house is empty now, just echoes and shadows. "Where am I supposed to go?" Mark asks, his voice small. "That's the beauty of it, Mark," I say, pausing at the threshold. "You're an adult. You have resources. Just like you told me 14 years ago, I'm sure you'll be better off wherever you end up." I walk out onto the porch and breathe in the cool night air. The moving trucks are gone. My car is waiting. The property is mine. The name is mine. The future is mine. But as I reach my car, I see a figure sitting on the curb at the end of the driveway. It's Hunter. He's sitting there with his gym bag, looking at the house that is no longer his home. I pull up next to him and roll down the window. He looks at me, and for the first time, I don't see Mark's arrogance. I see a kid who just had his entire world dismantled in a single afternoon. "She's gone," Hunter says, not looking at me. "My mom, she just drove past me and didn't even stop. She didn't even look at me." "I know," I say. "What happens now?" he asks, his voice trembling. I look at this boy, my brother. I could drive away. I could leave him here just like Mark left me. That would be the ultimate revenge, wouldn't it? To let the cycle continue. To let Mark's failures destroy the next generation. But then I remember Aunt Martha. I remember the woman who opened her door to a shivering girl and told her the world didn't owe her anything. But that didn't mean she had to be alone. I unlock the passenger side door. "Get in, Hunter," I say. He looks at me, stunned. "Why?" "Because," I say, staring straight ahead at the open road. The Hayes Trust has a scholarship program for students with complicated family histories, and unlike our father, I don't leave people at bus stops. Hunter stares at the open door for a long beat, a moment where his entire future hangs in the balance. Then he reaches out, grabs his bag, and slides into the leather seat. The interior of the SUV smells like success and expensive cedar, a stark contrast to the scent of decay and desperation we just left behind. As I pull out of the driveway, I glance at the rearview mirror. Mark is standing on the porch, a tiny, frail silhouette illuminated by the single flickering porch light. He looks like a ghost haunting his own life. He has no money, no wife, no son, and as of this afternoon, no name. He is exactly where he left me 14 years ago. Empty. "Where are we going?" Hunter asks, his voice barely a whisper. He's staring out the window at the familiar oak trees of his childhood, watching them disappear into the darkness. "To a hotel for tonight," I say, my hands steady on the wheel. "And tomorrow we sit down with my legal team. We're going to untangle the mess Sheila made of your college funds, and then..." Then you're going to learn what it actually means to be a Hayes. It's not about the cars or the house, Hunter. It's about the work. It's about being the kind of person who can look at themselves in the mirror without flinching. The drive back to Savannah is quiet, but it's a peaceful quiet. For years, I thought revenge would feel like a fire, hot, destructive, and loud. But as I watched the miles click by, I realized that real revenge is cold. It's the clinical removal of a cancer. I didn't destroy Mark. I simply stopped holding him up. I let the gravity of his own poor choices do the work for me. The next few months are a whirlwind. My team of contractors descends on the Georgia estate. We don't just renovate, we restore. We rip out Sheila's gaudy marble and floral carpets. We peel back the layers of status until we reach the original hardwood floors my mother loved. I replant the rose garden. I bring back the warmth that Mark spent a decade trying to smother. As for Mark, the generosity I showed him was a cage of its own. Without the Hayes name or the house to hide behind, he spiraled. I heard through the grapevine that he tried to sue for emotional distress. But no lawyer in the state would take the case once they saw the foreclosure papers and the evidence of his embezzlement. Last I heard, he was living in a cramped studio apartment in a part of town he used to mock, working a low-level desk job just to keep the lights on. Every now and then, I get a restricted call on my cell phone. I never answer. I don't need to hear his excuses or his apologies. Apologies are for mistakes. What he did was a choice, and choices have consequences. Sheila, or Brenda, was eventually picked up by the feds in South Carolina. Turns out, Mark wasn't her only victim, but he was the one who led the paper trail straight to her door. I made sure my investigators handed over every single document we found in that study. She'll be spending the next several years in a place where designer handbags aren't allowed. One afternoon, a year later, I'm standing in the garden of the restored house. The air is sweet with the scent of blooming jasmine. Hunter is there too, home for the summer after his first year of business school. He's different now, humbled, focused, and actually earning his keep as an intern at the trust. "Do you ever regret it?" Hunter asks, trimming a hedge near the porch. "Coming back here, taking it all?" I look up at the house. It finally looks like a home again. "No," I say, and I mean it. I didn't take anything that wasn't already mine by right. I just reclaimed a narrative that was stolen from me. I walk over to the small stone bench under the old oak tree. Beneath it, I've placed a small, modest plaque dedicated to my mother. It doesn't say wife or belonging to Mark. It just has her name and the words, resilient, unforgettable. This is the anatomy of revenge. It's not just about the fall of the villain, it's about the rise of the person they tried to break. It's about proving that you are more than the trauma they inflicted on you. I was a 14-year-old girl with a trash bag and a bus ticket. Today, I am the architect of my own legacy. As the sun sets over the Georgia pines, I realize that Mark's face that day, that look of absolute soul-crushing realization, was indeed priceless. But the peace I feel now, that's worth more than any inheritance. Accountability is a slow burn, but it always catches up. And karma isn't a bitch, it's a mirror, and some people just can't handle their own reflection. My name is Victoria Hayes. And I'm finally home.